Good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're coming from. My name is Chelsea Homeland. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships for ACCE. And thank you for joining our Partner Solutions session featuring Road Trip Nation today, titled Community Workforce Portal, Helping Young Adults Find Meaningful Work. So before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. This is an express session, so it'll only be about 20 minutes. That'll allow you about 5 to 10 minutes of transition time to get to the next track of sessions, which will begin at 3 p.m. Eastern time. All the attendees are going to be muted throughout the session, so please use the chat if you have any comments or questions for Tim, our speaker today. We'll use the last 5 to 7 minutes or so for Q&A, and we'll take as many questions as we can from the chat. This session is being recorded and will be available starting tomorrow on the event site. So please feel free to share with your colleagues who may not have been able to attend with us today. And now I will hand things over to Tim Hogan. He's the Vice President of Strategic Partnership at Road Trip Nation, and he'll get today's presentation started.
Great. Well, thank you, Chelsea, and thank you everybody for attending what I know is sometimes a little tough in the midst of the full work day to join virtual conferences. So again, thank you for taking the time, and hope everybody's doing well. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Road Trip Nation, we really are think of ourselves as kind of a two-headed nonprofit, a two-headed monster, if you will. One's focused on narrative change, media, storytelling side of our house, and the other is really more about career exploration and its role in education. And the way those things live together for us is we identify what we think of as socially relevant themes, and we realize how broad that is. But that could be a particular group of people, either opportunity youth, dreamers, veterans returning from service, single moms. It could be a particular industry, the accounting and auditing industry, tech entrepreneurship, the skilled trades. Or it could be a specific geographic region, the state of Indiana and career paths there, the state of Nevada and so forth, or even as specific as a particular city or market. And the way those stories or those themes come to life is we identify 3 individuals, and we have various production models, but this is really our kind of our marquee production model. We identify 3 individuals who are at the early stages of their career exploration journey within that particular theme. So the example I'm showing here is one we did within the state of Indiana for 3 young people who were trying to figure out what their options were to stay within the state. And the governor's office, we worked with closely on this, and a number of other organizations acknowledged that there's an assumption that Indiana is primarily agriculture, but one, trying to expose what the other options truly are across the state, and also to try to better understand what agriculture really is and all that it includes. It's not, it's not simply farming from the early 20th century. The innovation and the expertise that goes into this from a number of different industries is something that most individuals, especially young people, may not be aware of. So the way we structured it is identify these 3 individuals through an application process. Then we put them on the road in one of our green RVs. So this team traveled the state of Indiana and stopped along the way to interview leaders of all different backgrounds, all different career paths, to really better understand how they defined their roads in life and how they maneuvered their life and career path, in this case, across the state of Indiana. Our production crew goes with them really as their guides and mentors on this journey, but also capturing all of it on video. And the end results of the project is a documentary aired primarily on public television as our biggest outlet, each project reaching about 50 million households. But this is where we start to pivot into the career exploration and education side of the house, and that every interview we conduct, though the content will feed into the documentary project, it also produces somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 12 short form videos about that individual's path in life. So it could be 30 seconds about leveraging a mentor, right? And the importance of that as you're defining your career path. It could be 90 seconds about having a job you really didn't want, but you needed to be able to get to that next step. Or 45 seconds about having the perfect job, but being laid off and what you did with it. Really, the way we think about it is these stories are all the little gaps in your LinkedIn profile that we don't put on our LinkedIn profile, right? The things that get us to where we are that we don't always highlight when we're trying to present ourselves in identifying the next job, which is especially important as we think about 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are just getting exposed to others' career paths. And when they look at a LinkedIn profile, they see it as absolute perfection, right? Because that's how we position it. And the reality is they need to understand the bumps and twists and turns that really get us to where we are. Now, each one of those videos that I mentioned, can feeds into a larger database of about 8,500 videos of all the folks we've met over 20 years on these road trips and other production projects and other interviewing projects, talking about these different pivot points in their life. And the reality is we, as much as we'd like young people to go watch all 8,500 videos so they can figure out what's next, may not be the most efficient way for them to determine their road in life. So we have a number of exploration tools that make it a bit easier. And this is just one example by starting simply with interests or possible interest, right? You're not totally hitching your wagon to this. This is really just the exploration process. But if you come across, if someone's looking at this and thinking maybe education, but you know what, I also want to pursue business, but I like being creative. Really, there's nothing out there for me. What comes up is labor market data that we've essentially repackaged to make it a bit more engaging, that bring the careers to the top of the pile here that align with those interests. Same thing with majors. If post-secondary education pathway is where you're heading, but then our sweet spot are those leaders, right? The people who not only can we show them, yes, there are careers that align with their interests, we can show people who have chosen those same interests and talk through their career path, their life milestones that allowed them to reach this point in their careers, the education they needed to leverage to get to that next stop in their career, the circles that I just selected as well, and then the real life hurdles, the things that they had to overcome or be a part of, or to help them get to where they are. First generation immigrant, first generation college student, and what that reality was like as they were developing their own career. Now, the database itself we think of as kind of our arsenal for impact, if you will, leveraging all of that content to have the greatest impact we possibly can on those that we're trying to serve. But with 8,500 videos, one of the questions for us is, are there slivers of this content that are more relevant to some audiences than others? And this kind of gets to the core of the session that we wanted to talk about today, that hopefully is relevant to the folks in this room, is taking slivers of our content focused on a particular geographic area and leveraging them in a way where they can have a greater impact. So the example we can turn to is some work we did really heading into last summer at obviously an uncertain time for a lot of folks, but in working with the Chicago Cook County Workforce Board in late spring of last year, one of the things we were talking about is that their greatest impact is primarily made through in-person workshops in the summer. As we all know, summer 2020 wasn't ideal for doing those kind of workshops. So the question became, how do we humanize the career exploration process for individuals that we cannot bring into a physical space, but then also bring greater attention to digital tools that already exist that may be a bit disparate out there in web world, or have not been driving enough traffic to put them into as much use as they possibly can. So this is an example of what we built for Chicago Cook County, what we refer to as a community hub. And so the idea is that we take content from our database that is most relevant to that particular audience. So in this case, all of the content, all the leaders that we've interviewed in the city of Chicago or in and around Chicago really is the entry hall to this larger experience, to not only show what these career paths could be, but to hear the stories of people within that particular market or within that particular city. We're also able to pull forward stories based on particular themes. Obviously, at this point in time, especially when we were building this last summer, resilience was hugely important. Never hurts to have a name or face that people recognize, to get an extra click or two to start to get those human-centered stories. But then we start to turn into, as I was referring to before, the resources that we know work on the ground. The reality is we're not experts on the next steps job seekers and young people should take in the city of Chicago. The Workforce Development Board and the other partners there in that particular market are. So we try to find ways where we can take our human-centered content, tie it to resources that already exist in that market, so that there is inspiration, clarity, and a next step, not just inspiration standing on the edge of a cliff. So we were able to pull these resources in that are specific to Chicago and the work that they're doing in that market. And then we're also able to surface virtual day in the life videos that, to be fair, were kind of buried in our archive for a while, and that they'd be relevant in some situations and more so than others. But as we went into the pandemic, where job shadowing simply wasn't a thing for a little while, the virtual day in the life videos kind of found new life, if you will, especially if we can package a day in the life of a chef with Chicago specific retail, hospitality, and culinary tools. So we're able to combine what's been built specific to that city or that market, and then tie it directly to human-centered stories that help bring to life why this is a career path that an individual might want to pursue. We're also able within the community hubs to put a few more features and tools involved, either from our partners that we're working with on the project, partners they have within the community, or other content and tools that we have available. So able to include specific documentaries if they're relevant to that particular audience. In this case, Opportunity Youth, first generation college students, the skilled trades, we brought those to the surface. And then a couple of our own tools that we built that have found some relevance within the community hub. The first one being our Share Your Road platform, which allows individuals to come and share their own story without having to sit down with a student or have a green RV parked in their driveway to conduct the interview in a larger production process. This essentially allows us to crowdsource more stories across a market of people telling their true story about, the real story about how they got to where they are, helping to expose the realities of that process to those who are at the beginning points of that journey. And then lastly, we about 10 years ago, we had built a curriculum, the idea being to bring the road trip experience to classrooms across the country without having everybody have to hop into an RV. We've evolved it over the years, and last fall launched a digital version that's 5 lessons, not so much a curriculum, a little bit more of a project-based learning program, such that it can be nimble and teachers can run it over the course of a week or over the course of the semester, a little bit more like an accordion. And it all leads up to an interview project where they reach out to somebody within their community that they've never met before, using the networking skills that are learned through this program. They conduct this interview and they're able to create a leader profile like you saw within our larger Road Trip Nation interview archive that helps them understand what that person's particular story was. Now, the reality is, if I sit down with Chelsea, for example, we talk for an hour and I find out that we don't have anything in common, find out her whole career and life journey, and there's nothing in line with my interests, that's still okay, because the reality is what I'm starting to learn is that I can build social capital by building my own network and learning what my opportunities truly might be by leveraging these types of tools. Even though my community may not have the resources it needs, there are ways to begin to increase your social capital, which, as we all know, is incredibly important especially as you're getting your career started, such that you can build more of it as time goes on. So I am going to try to cut myself off here so we can move into some questions. But in essence, to kind of wrap this up, really what we do as an organization is try to find the most helpful ways to tell stories that are going to help folks in their career journeys. And what we've seen, especially in the midst of, wake of, hopefully, COVID, is that market-specific content, especially attached to tools that we know work within that market, allow us to stay in our lane and build bridges to those who are doing really great work in those particular markets. And that's what we feel we can have the greatest impact, is by doing what we know how to do best and leaning on those who know how to take those next steps as part of the larger process. So with that, I'm happy to take some questions in the short time we have here. But again, thanks for kind of hearing the story of where we are with Road Trip Nation today.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was great. We do have one question. What kind of results have you seen with some of this work?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nikki. There's a few pieces to that. The project-based learning program that I mentioned to you, we've done a couple of third-party evaluations on that, and the biggest results have been primarily in building social capital, and in some cases actually increasing GPA, which to be honest was not the primary focus of the program, but not a bad thing to assist with. But really the results that we've seen have primarily been within building social capital and connecting education to work, understanding how education applies to work. I will be honest with you, in terms of the community hub, that Chicago structure, we just launched it last summer. We're in the midst of an evaluation in partnership with the Gates Foundation and the Connected Learning Lab at UCI to dig a little bit more into it, recognizing that, surprise, surprise, it's not perfect, right? There are going to be things we want to do a little bit better, primarily focusing on the environment in which this content is presented. So we'll have a lot more learnings as we head into the fall, but really built around previous evaluations about the impact of the content and the programs that we built.
Great, thanks, Tim. Do you have any innovative ways that chambers or economic development organizations can creatively leverage these stories?
Yeah, I think that's really the fun part for us, is really kind of bringing the folks into the table, right? Because we've done this in a number of different markets as well: Las Vegas, Dallas, Houston, Tennessee, South Carolina, and each one is a little bit different based on the players at the table. So I'd love it if there was just a quick answer, here's how we do it everywhere, right? So it depends a little bit on the priorities, even the structures of some of those organizations to make sure that we're packaging everything as well as we can. What we've seen, I think, is the greatest impact is when you've got programs already running within that city, beyond just the building of a community hub, that need to bring greater attention to that work, taking that human-centered storytelling, even creating new content as part of it to bring greater attention to things that are already in motion, is probably the most helpful. So Sherry, I realize that's a bit of a vague answer in that it depends a little bit on the market. But for what it's worth, that's the part we probably enjoy the most, recognizing that this isn't a one-size-fits-all thing because we're all in very different places from city to city, especially at this point in time.
Great, thanks, Tim. Can you share a little bit about how people just start to bring this to their community? Just kind of where do you begin?
For sure, yeah. So two things. One, roadtripnation.com, that homepage and that search tool that I walked through, that is free and open and available on the site. So is that project-based learning program. So we can share those links as well. The idea being we're trying to get as much of this out as we possibly can. I will say that the building of a community hub specific to a particular market, producing additional content and so forth, that's where we raise funds for to allow us to do more of that. But in terms of the starting point, as much as I'd love to say, jump right in and make this big investment in trying to, I don't mean to overstate it, but make this investment in trying to bring all of the right things together. Look at the website and the roadmap exploration tool, as well as the other community hubs, which we've already built that are free and open to folks, as well as the project-based learning program. Because really our goal is to connect all these dots so that they're available versus having them hidden behind a curtain somewhere.
That's great. So Nikki kind of gave us a high level overview, and they're basically a small community looking to focus on the students who might be a better fit for a certification path or a community college instead of a 4-year degree. What is the most important thing they need to be aware of going in, given that context?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Nikki. I mean, I think the reality is we all know the landscape is shimmying and shaking underneath us right now. And if you join any sessions that say they have the perfect answer, write it down, right? Because we're very much in the thick of it. I do think, though, that the project-based learning program that allows them to search through their own network and better understand, not necessarily the story of the person they're talking to, but the fact that there's more to understand, is going to be an incredibly important part of this, especially as we start to understand and students start to better understand 2-year, 4-year stackable certifications, what's going to be the right next thing. It's going to be different for all of us. And there's not one single answer, but from where we sit, the exploration and the better understanding of different stories that are out there and other paths that folks have built on their own is really going to start softening the ground so they can, as we see it, define their own road in life, right? You need to understand all the options, but it really should be tied to your own particular focus.
Thanks, Tim. I think we have time for one more question. So we got the question about what the cost is to have Road Trip Nation come to your city and build some of this content.
Sure, varies on the bells and whistles, right? As you might imagine. As a baseline for building a community hub, it's really in the neighborhood of 150,000 to 200 and up to build the whole shebang, right? With everything we include. In terms of the level of production, we have 8,500 videos in the database, and we had about 1,000 a year. The content you may need may be right there. If we need to produce additional content to make it a bit more geographically relevant, that's kind of the sliding scale. So like any good cost question, the first thing you'll hear is, it depends, right? But it really does in terms of the amount of content we want to create, because we need it to be relevant, right, to that particular audience. Especially if there's a geographic focus or there's a market specific focus that is especially important, which I imagine is the case based on the work that all of you all do.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for sharing your time and experience with all of us today. And thank you to everyone for attending. Again, the session was recorded and available and will be on the event site tomorrow. So please visit Road Trip Nation's virtual booth and profile page for more information. And just a reminder that our next Partner Solutions track begins in about 10 minutes or 3 p.m. Eastern time. And with that, Tim, I'll just let you have a final quick word to close out today's session.
Yeah, I think really just a thank you, right? I think we're all in the thick of a really strange and important time. And I think the thing that we've been encouraged by is there's a lot of creative thinking going on about what we can do to more efficiently support each other, especially young people, as they're trying to figure out what the next steps look like. So whether or not we go into a deep partnership with Road Trip Nation or with your particular market, please leverage the content that's available, because I imagine there are going to be pieces, and our goal is to help folks to find their roads in life, regardless of what particular role we play. So thank you. Keep up the good work. And again, thank you for taking the time to listen a little bit in the thick of what I know are already very busy days.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tim. And thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the summit today.
Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, everybody.